death. People died in the cars.
Was there any food in the cars to eat?
They would stop the wagon once a day, and they would give food. They also would put in a bucket of water for drinking. But we had death, and it was constantly moaning. There was constantly moaning and crying, and people just couldn't cope with it. And we arrived in Birkenau, and we were absolutely more eager to get out of those cars than any place that I have ever been in my life. I mean, the people just fell out of the cars, were so eager. The stench in the cars was beyond belief. And we were supposed to sit there all the time. We were never allowed to stand up. You can imagine the torture that thing is. So we got to Birkenau, the doors opened up, and we all piled out.
We're going to stop here
Okay.
and continue that. Tape number 3, August 1st, 1995, survivor David Stein, interviewer Sharon Steinberg-Pearlman. Mr. Stein, you were telling us about when you arrived at Birkenau.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to backtrack just somewhat, because the trains were stopped from time to time, and German soldiers with rifles would point, and then they would take out the dead, and they would give a fresh bucket of water, and bread was placed.
How often did you stop?
They stopped like once a day. It's maybe sometimes twice a day, but once a day for sure.
How long was the trip to Birkenau?
And about 3 to 4 days.
Did people see these transports going by? Did villagers see these trains going
Well,
by?
if you lived by a railroad track and you saw trains going and going and going and going, eventually you start thinking, well, where are these trains going? But people saw, in any case, I have later on, when I'm in the concentration camp, I will testify how the people saw. So we spilled out of Birkenau, and we were told to line up quickly. We lined up, and there were inmates, Polish Jews, who were whispering to the people who were lining up, and I really didn't understand what they were saying.
Did you know you were in Birkenau? Was there a
No.
sign that said Birkenau?
No, we didn't know where we were. But it was just from the main line, it branched off, and it came there, and there were buildings, there were barbed wire, there were army barracks, and we didn't know where we were. Absolutely, we didn't know.
That's what you saw when they opened up.
Right,
the
that's
doors.
what we saw, right. And so we lined up, and we marched down the road, and a man stood at a fork in the road, and he would very gently point this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. And if you wanted to go to the line that ultimately ended up in the gas chambers immediately, they didn't stop you. I mean, if let's say that a grandmother had a grandchild, and the mother wanted to go along, they let you do it.
Did you know at the time that
No,
was the
we
line
didn't-
that ultimately led to the gas
No,
chambers?
we didn't know. Nobody knew anything. We didn't know. But there was whispering going on. The inmates, the Polish inmates, were whispering. My father never told me what they were whispering about. In any case, my father, myself, and my mother, and my 2 sisters, my aunt Louisa, not her husband, and her children were directed to go to the right. And I had my aunt Marish, the youngest of the sisters, who had 2 little boys. Half the family only survived. So then we got to Birkenau, and they assigned us to barracks. No, before they assigned us to barracks, they said they were going to make us take showers to clean up.
Were you with your family?
I was with my father. They had separated men and women, and I was with my father.
Your sisters and your
I
mother?
saw nobody else except my father. My sister was, my two sisters and mothers were also went to the right, but then they split them, male and female. So they made us undress. It was late at night by this time. They made us undress and put our clothes in little piles and made us go in and take showers. So when we came out from the showers, they gave us the striped uniforms of prisoners. That was the first time we got striped uniforms. And they made us line up to be taken to the barracks. And all of this was handled by other prisoners. You know, the SS were on the periphery, but they really never came into the ranks of the prisoners. And then they told us we were prisoners, and we were going to work for Germany, and they made big speeches there. I didn't understand what they were saying.
What language was it in?
In German.
Did you speak any German?
No, I spoke Yiddish, which is akin to German, but I tell you, you're so confused you wouldn't even know what they said, even if I spoke pure German.
And how old were you then?
I was then 13 and a half years old.
Did you have any understanding of what was going on?
No. Didn't understand it.
What did you think as a 13-year-old boy in a shower with your father, with all these people?
We were so hungry, and we were so tired, and we were so confused that you really didn't, you couldn't sit down and logically think about what was happening. You were just pushed along, and they had these sticks, batons that they kept hitting people if they didn't please them how fast we went. So we lined up for the, what do you call, and I looked over where we had left the clothing, and I saw my father had a three-quarter jacket with a Persian fur collar, which I particularly loved on him. It made him look like a country gentleman. I just loved it on him. So I said to him, I says, Tata, dat is our mantel. And I ran, and I picked it up, and I gave it to him, and he put it on. And it was like lightning strike. Somebody just hit him with a stick. And they told him to put the jacket back. You don't need the jacket. You're a prisoner. That's what it. So then they marched us into barracks, wooden barracks, and they had bunks, 3 high. They were like made from wood, from boards, and they would have 3 facing. There were 6 prisoners to each bunk. Obviously, the bunk wasn't made for 6 people, maybe. And they made us go in there, and we spent the night. And the morning, they roused us up very early in the morning, and they made us go out for Zählerpell. That means head counting. And they gave us coffee and bread. That was the first formal food that we got with the Germans. And after they made us line up, and we noticed on the uniform was a white stripe cross. And after the coffee and bread, we went through a line, took our jackets off, and a man would stencil the number on it. They no longer were tattooing. This was very late. It was very late, 1944. So they were no longer tattooing, but they put a number on it and a yellow triangle designating us as Jews.
Do you remember your number?
I remember the number, but my wife tells me that I had given it a different number at one time, and she had written it down, so I don't remember the number. And they then gave us the numbers, and we got soup. Lunchtime we got soup, and the routine started. They gave us mess kits, you know, little plates where we could, and also a canteen that we could have And we went on, along like for 2 or 3 days. And there was the sanitary conditions. There was a latrine, which was a long ditch with a plank, a wooden plank on it that you would sit on to do your natural things. And my father came to me and he showed me a roll of money. He said to me, "I am going to throw it away." So I looked at him, I said, "What do you mean? Where did you get the money?" So he said that he had put it inside his body just in case it would come in handy, but he says, "We will never need that money again." So he threw it down into that latrine and into the ditch. And it changed everything. My father's outlook changed. And about 3 days after, they made us line up and they were going to sanitize us, cut the hair, cut off all the hair, and including the pubic hair. So when you got through, they would other prisoners would cut your hair, and then you would go further along and you step up on a step, and there were guys would cut your pubic hair. And I stood up there, and this guy looked at me, and he looked over to the man. He says, "Hey, look what we have here," he says. "This one doesn't even have pubic hair." And I was sort of startled. I didn't understand what he meant. And later, we all had assigned bunks. And after, when you had to go to sleep, I heard this guy says, "Hey, young one," he says, "come here." And I didn't understand. I didn't know what he meant. And I got out of my bunk and I approached him. And he started to molest me. And we made a commotion. And it was the Germans who were the real bosses over there. You know, all of these people who did the work were basically, they were Polish, non-Jewish Poles. But the real bosses were the Germans. Those were the ones that had red for political prisoner or black for murderers. They also had some pink for homosexuals. They were all designated, and they had their hierarchy. So he came over to where that Polish guy was molesting me, and he just started to swing his stick, and he ran away. He didn't speak to me, he didn't say anything, he just turned around and he walked away, and I went back into the bunk.
Did your father know what was going on?
I tried to tell my father, and he says, "I know." And he didn't say anything. I feel bad for him, honest, because he didn't have a good ending. And soon after that, they began to ship us out, and they shipped us out to another concentration camp. While we were there, we really learned the truth. People pointed out the crematoria and all of the chimneys, they were burning night and day. The flames, you could see the flames shooting out the top of the chimneys.
Who was telling you what was going on?
The people that worked, picked up the dead, people were dying. Even though we were the young, strong ones, people were dying. They caught diseases, and they were dying. So they would come in to pick up the dead, and they would tell us. And we began to realize what was happening, that they were killing the Jews. And they took us to another camp, and it was called Mauthausen.
How did you get to Mauthausen?
We went by train.
Again by train?
Again.
How long a ride was that?
No, it wasn't too long a ride, because I don't remember much about it. I know we got there early in the morning, and we lined up, and you know, and they called out the numbers. We were all known by numbers, and you had to respond to the number. And then if a number was missing, they had to look for the what do you call, And if the guy wasn't lined up, he was not going to be alive next day. So you really lined up.
You were still with your father?
Yes.
Did you know anything about where your mother and your sisters were?
No, we knew nothing. We never saw them after we detrained.
So last time you saw them was
Right,
in Birkenau?
when Birkenau, when we got to the train. So then we lined up, and it was taking a long time, and I fainted. And the people around me roused me up and told my father that I must be strong because they don't allow people who faint.
You fainted on the train?
No, I fainted standing in line early in the morning. So then we were assigned to sleeping quarters, and we were put to work. We were working in a quarry. There was a stone quarry there, also limestones. And what they did, they had people breaking up the stones, and then it was taken and broken into smaller places and was put into canvas bags. These were just big canvas squares which had a string on it, and then my work was to pick up this canvas bag, walk to a silo, and dump the crushed rock into the silo, which then were picked up by either trucks, or there was a railroad train underneath too. They could fill up a whole railroad car with the crushed rock. And we worked there for a while. I don't know how many weeks we were there, and then suddenly in the morning when we lined up to go to work, they called the numbers and they said, step aside, step out, step out, step out. We were placed upon trains again. And we were taken to a concentration camp called Melk, which is the work camp for Mauthausen. Mauthausen was like a main concentration camp, and then they had those work camps which were assigned to specific projects. And
so when was this? What month is this?
And this is in the summer of late summer of 1944. I spent some time in Auschwitz, some time in Mauthausen, and then we arrived in Melk.
Well, how long were you in Auschwitz?
We were there about 2, 3, 4 weeks. I don't have the exact chronological dates with that.
Were you working in each of these places?
And we never worked in Mauthausen. We worked in Mauthausen we worked. We never worked at Birkenau, but we in Mauthausen we worked in the rock quarry.
Well, if you didn't work in Birkenau, what did
we weren't there
all
that
day?
long. We really weren't that long. They were delousing us, and they were giving us numbers, and they were waiting for transport. You know, transport was a big thing. They didn't have, you know, it wasn't like a scheduled railroad. You know, the military took precedence. So we arrived in Melk, and surprise of all surprises, Melk, after the other two places, looked like a paradise.
Why is that?
Because the housing for the prisoners were former army barracks. These were buildings, they were substantial buildings, they were made out of concrete. They were not wooden structures, not barracks, they were concrete permanent military installations. It was adjacent to a military installation.
Were the beds different also?
The beds were different, they were single beds. It's the first time we saw single beds stacked up, one on top of the other. And the food was much more orderly here. They would give you in the morning coffee, bread and coffee. The bread was for 2 meals, and you were forbidden to eat the whole bread in the morning. They definitely didn't want you to eat it. And so the other part of the bread went inside the jacket. And they could tell if you ate the bread or you didn't eat the bread. If you didn't have a bulge, or if you ate the bread and you put some paper there and they discovered it, it was a death sentence. So you didn't eat the bread. And they assigned us to work in an area which was a train ride away, maybe a half hour or 35 minutes. And when we got there, there was one huge tunnel dug into a mountain, and inside this tunnel was machinery that built ammunition, guns and ammunition. And they put us to work digging the second tunnel adjacent to this tunnel, because these are bomb-proof munitions factories that were inside the mountain. And so we continued to work there the rest of the late summer and fall, and then winter came along, and you know, we only had the clothing that we wore was single. You know, there was a pair of pants, a pair of wooden shoes, and a jacket and a cap. And there was no underwear, there was nothing warm, and so we continued to work there and travel back and forth between the camp and the munitions factory that we were building.
They would take you there in the morning and come back in the evening?
Right. We would travel there in the morning. We would have sailor pal. They would give us breakfast. They would put us in the train and take us and then bring us back late at night.
And you worked nonstop all day?
All day we had nonstop. They gave us soup for lunch because they gave us nothing when we came back. It was too late. So.
This is all. What was the age range of the people you were working with? Because you were young.
Yes.
But what about the other people? Were there older
Well, it
people?
was my father's age, which we consider really old because at the quality of life ages people very quickly. So they were basically young people in their 13, 14, 15, 18. Then there was a big gap because those people went to work camps. They were never really taken to concentration camp. And then we had people in the 40s and 50s. And
you were still with your father at this time?
yes, we were still with my father. And what would happen that the conditions began to worsen in camp. We were also, we had a half a day off on Sunday, at which time we would take our shower, a weekly shower. They gave us a weekly shower. Now later on, they gave us a whole day Sunday off. They didn't have the transport to take us to work. They needed the railroad. So Sunday after the shower, it's going to sound gross to you, but that's exactly what we did. We would sit in front of the barracks. We would take off our shirt, and inside the seams adjacent to the underarms, there were hundreds and hundreds of lice that would eat away at us. And so in the crotch area of the pants. And the older ones would teach the younger ones how to discern which is an egg to kill the eggs of the lice. Just killing the lice is not good enough. And we spent a Sunday afternoon doing that. It was just, the lice were as debilitating as anything else the Germans did. And when winter came, we used to put our pants out and freeze them because the body warmth kept them alive. So winter came. Oh no, winter came, right. Winter came, and men were dying of cold because, you know, it's still cotton thing, and in Austria is very cold. They discovered that if you took paper from the cement, because they used cement to build the tunnels, to reinforce the tunnels, if you took the paper from the cement and you'd put it around your body, that would act as an insulator and that you would survive. And we did the same thing inside the pants. And
did they ever find out that you took the paper?
They didn't object to it. They were so short of labor that they were beginning to not to just send you to crematoria, you know, willy-nilly. If you were healthy, they wanted you to work.
Did you see people who were being killed at the time?
First of all, if you got sick, if you got fever and you went to the infirmary, you never came back. So people died with their fever. And if you stayed back, if you didn't fall out for work, if you stayed back in your bunk, you were too sick, they would send you to the, and how did we know it? Because 3 people were left behind every day. Each barrack had 3 people, and these people had to make order in the barracks. So if somebody was in bed, we had to report it, and that person was taken to the infirmary and was never seen again. So people used to die. They used to go with fever, they go with infections, they go to work. And then the work, oh, before we get to that, no, let me go to that first. Okay, the work suddenly changed. Instead of digging tunnel, continue to dig the tunnel, they stopped the digging of the tunnel, and we dug square holes on the top of the finished tunnel, and we loaded it with TNT. That had to be many, many tons of TNT that we pushed into these holes. Subsequently, this whole thing was blown up because the Russian army was approaching. And as we were in the barracks, whether we were standing in line and waiting to go to work or we had our day off, we would see the planes come overhead. The Russian planes came overhead, and they would circle and circle and circle and go away. And then they started to bomb the German garrison, which was adjacent to the concentration camp. And one day, they bombed the concentration camp itself. Obviously, it was a mistake because the building wasn't the same. And there was devastating results, absolutely devastating results. These were concrete buildings that collapsed and crushed many, many people.
This was during the day or during the night?
During the day, on our day off.
Oh, it was on a Sunday.
And it caused havoc. So they quickly had to clean up. They made us take all the wounded people to the infirmary, which they dispatched them, and they counted how many people remained alive, and then food didn't come in. They stopped feeding us. They had problems. Whatever the reason was, we didn't get our rations. And as the days went on, somebody discovered that in the kitchen area of the concentration camp, they were using a soft yellow coal. And they said that if you take that yellow coal and you eat it, you chew on it. They said, don't swallow it. Chew on it, it has nutrients in it. But unfortunately, it didn't have any nutrients, and many people swallowed it because they were so hungry, and that further decimated the concentration camp population. And all along, they were replacing from mud house. They would send replacements for the people who died, but they no longer were sending replacements. So our ranks were becoming thinner and thinner.
When it was full, how many were you?
I really couldn't tell you. There were hundreds and hundreds, because the train was a big, long train. And they didn't replace, so the yellow coal caused a catastrophe amongst the prisoners, because many people ate it because they were dying of hunger. Then one day they brought in a horse and they shot him, the horse in the square. And they told the people that they're going to cook the horse and they were going to give us food. But many people they couldn't wait. And they were attacking the raw horse. They were trying to eat the raw horse, and that caused a big problem. And the SS came charging in there. And
when you say caused a big problem, what do you mean?
Well, because we were out of control. We were attacking this horse. They had to cook it. You know, a horse is a big animal. It's lying there, and they're attacking it. They were drinking the blood. They're doing all kinds of things. Then when we finished making those square holes in